Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now,
Thank you.
First, fracking. Because MPs will decide today whether fracking should be allowed under national parks and other protected sites. Campaigners have accused the government of a U-turn after it promised an outright ban on fracking in environmentally sensitive areas. Well, earlier I talked to the Liberal Democrat leader Tim Farron. I began by asking him that since the regulations governing fracking means we won't actually see it happening in the national parks, what's the problem?
Well, the point is it'll, of course, start very close to national parks, and the fact that it's happening underneath them will be a huge reputational risk when it comes to the marketing and promotion of Britain's most significant national parks. I'm bound to have an interest in this, given that two of them are in my patch, but
yes,
across the country that is going to be problematic. I have to say that it also comes on the back of just a couple of weeks ago, the government basically ending the carbon capture and storage programme. And that is the programme which made, to some people at least, shale gas tolerable. The reality is that shale gas without carbon capture and storage is not a long-term runner, either environmentally or in a business sense. So what we're seeing today is a kind of landscape issue, an issue which will be damaging to the visual landscape and indeed to our national parks' very integrity.
Right, but the government claims it wouldn't actually destroy or spoil the aesthetics of the landscape in the way you've described.
Well, national parks don't just begin at a wall. They generally speaking kind of evolve, so to speak. You drive up the M6, you drive towards my constituency. It's not urban sprawl and suddenly you've hit Windermere. The reality is it's beautiful mountains and hills and lakes and a beautiful landscape, and then the national park begins, and it gets even more beautiful, dare I say it. So doing this a kilometre outside of a national park is pretty outrageous. We're not just talking about national parks, we're talking about areas of outstanding natural beauty, triple SIs, all sorts of places that are either culturally, visually, or in terms of biodiversity,
right,
very, very significant. So this is very damaging to our natural environment. But as I say, it also comes on the back of the government undermining the business and environmental case for shale gas at all.
Right, I take
That's
your
why
point.
we'll vote against it.
I mean, I take your point about carbon capture, but are you not persuaded by the chairman of the task force on shale gas, Chris Smith, who says that turning to shale gas could actually cut emissions by lowering reliance on coal?
And he's also since said, basically since the ending of the carbon capture and storage scheme, that is not the case now, that we're in a situation where shale gas is attractiveness, really, from an energy point of view and indeed from an environmental point of view, has been completely dismantled by George Osborne's removal of the funding for carbon capture and storage. So it's very clear that it was thought that shale gas was potentially a less damaging fossil fuel than some of the ones we're using, but without CCS, it's just in the same place.
All right.
And it's not a long-term bet. So any business person thinking to make a long-term investment in shale gas wouldn't sensibly do that now anyway.
Tim Farron, thank you.
Thank you.
Sam Gyimah, in January, the Energy Minister Amber Rudd told the House of Commons there would be an outright ban on fracking in national parks, sites of special interest and areas of natural beauty. What's happened?
Well, what's happened is that strategically we're exactly in the same place, that we believe that shale gas is a bridge to a low-carbon future. It's going to make sure that we have more secure energy, and it's going to be great for our economy.
Yeah, but what's happened to the ban? I mean, she said there'd be an outright ban, and now there isn't going to be an outright ban. You are going to
There will be no
actually
fracking under national parks as a result of the regulations that we'll be voting on in Parliament today. Those regulations were laid
They'll be close
in
to national
July.
parks, won't they?
But there will be no fracking under national parks, and I think it's absolutely worth making that very clear, rather than the scaremongering that Tim Farron is trying to engineer to get heard. There will be no fracking under national parks. Strategically, we're in exactly the same place as we are, and I think this is very good news in terms of having a secure energy future.
Right. Has this ban been overturned? Has this been a U-turn?
Yeah, well, Tim Farron's had a lapse of memory. It wasn't Amber Rudd, it was a Lib Dem Energy Secretary back in January that wanted to do exactly what the government's now doing. And they were only stopped then by Labour, making sure that the legislation was changed to put the proper safeguards for the environment in. Personally, I'm not against fracking in principle, as long as you've got the health you've got the environmental safeguards, and there should be no fracking in or under national parks. We debated that back in January, and that shouldn't be changed.
Right. So this is, in that sense, an about turn, because there will now be fracking near national parks, and the way that Tim Farron has described it, as you drive up to places of natural beauty, you are going to see evidence of drilling.
I think the big question here, and I have a constituency that has got areas of outstanding natural beauty, are the environmental standards that we apply.
Right, but they're not in place either.
We will have in this country the best environmental safeguards there are around fracking and the extraction of seal gas, and that should give comfort that yes, there will be no fracking under national parks, but we will take the best possible safeguards there are to ensure that our environment is protected.
You've just axed funding for carbon capture and storage technology, which was seen as crucial for creating a shale gas industry that would be acceptable.
And I think that's the bigger problem. You know, you're clueless and confused on energy policy. You know, you haven't managed to get a carbon capture and storage policy underway. You're kicking the legs from out of the solar energy
Labour Party's trying to have it both ways.
You're clueless and confused.
The Labour Party's trying to have it both ways. They're trying to say, on the one hand, they support this bridge to a low-carbon future, but on the other hand, trying to vote against this, which is really about an outright ban.
This is carbon energy. You want to give the green light, a full go-ahead to fracking in the very week that the
Are
very
you in
last
favour of
coal
fracking or are you
mine
not?
in Britain closes at Kellingley on Friday.
Are you in favour of fracking or are you not?
I've said earlier on, I'm happy to see fracking as long as there's
So why are you
sufficient
voting against the regulations?
Because you haven't put the proper safeguards in place, either for national
What
parks,
safeguards do you
for
want
the
to see that are
environment,
not in place?
or for the safety of this, and you haven't put in place yet either the sort of rewards that have to come to the areas that have to put up with fracking in the future.
Right, but let's do the carbon capture. Why would you axe the funding for carbon capture and storage technology if you wanted to go ahead with fracking and creating a shale industry?
I think the most important thing, as I've said, is that we have the best environmental regulations that we can have. And that is where we're going to end up. I think strategically, we are in exactly the right place as we should be. I haven't heard from the opposition parties anything other than the usual scaremongering on how to go ahead with building this energy secure future.
I think what's behind
Final
this
word.
is a sudden panic from the government, faced with, like, the National Grid last
Regulations
month,
were laid in July. It's not
telling
sudden.
industry users to try and scale back on what they're using because they're very worried about the lights going out, not having enough power in the country because you haven't got a clear enough plan or the investment to get the new energy generation online. That's the real problem.
I've been getting